What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Blink-182's fourth album. This album came out in the spring of 2001 and it's called Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Basically, it's the follow-up project after 1999's Enema of the State, which was particularly successful. That was a pretty noteworthy project. Had some real quality hit singles like What's My Age Again, All the Small Things, and Adam's Song, all of which did particularly well in the rock charts and really helped revitalize and kind of keep sharp the pop punk era from like the late 90s to early 2000s and such, and it really did a great job of that. That album, Enema of the State, went multi-platinum, and it kind of paved the way for this project, as the label wanted Blink-182 to follow it up relatively quickly. But looking at this project, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, I feel like the singles this time, they are refined, but they just don't have the distinction bite. Like, they have bite, but they just don't have the distinction bite of like the singles from Enema of the State. They are good, but there's not really a song as large as like All the Small Things or even What's My Age Again. I feel like the highest charting song off this project that wasn't in the hardcore rock charts was just The Rock Show, which is pretty mellow compared to some of the songs that came off of Enema of the State. And I think that's just kind of the prospect about it, where I did like this project, and ultimately I would have to say I like this album better than I like Enema of the State. But it's just kind of the fact that the songs are just not quite the furor is just not quite there in terms of pitch. But I would have to say the furor is just not there in terms of pitch. But I would have to say that I do feel like this album did pretty good in terms of the context of it. It's just the fact, I do feel like the singles did pretty well this time around. It's just the fact that they just don't have the sheer bite of like the ones off of Enema of the State. And I do feel like, as far as that kind of went, I mean, ultimately I would have to say I recommend picking up Enema of the State and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket in the same 1-2 punch, because they're both good. But I think the more you listen to it, it just kind of has like a vibe of trying to decide which of the records is better, or something like that. I mean, it's just one of those situations where I think, despite the fact that this album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket's the better album, I feel like the singles just have more commercial flair off of like Enema of the State. That's kind of the reason why there's more commercial flair on Enema of the State, which is why I think some folks might prefer that one. But I prefer this one. It's just the fact that the singles just didn't quite stack up in terms of that quality, but they are decent. So to talk about the first single is The Rock Show, and basically this is a pretty like factory made. Talk about the first single is The Rock Show, and this is a pretty stock and factory made Blink-182 song. It just really feels kind of like just a standard kind of carbon copy, just a token punk rock song that just kind of comes out, and it just has like that mellow vibe of picking up some chick at a rock show and dating after that and really being enthralled with her and that type stuff. And I definitely like the pitch of it, but it just is so token. It's just kind of, I feel like that's kind of the concept about it. It just really, compared to the singles off of Enema of the State, this is just one that just kind of felt like just pumped out and just kind of feels pretty substandard. But I do like it. It's not a bad song. It's just kind of, I feel like for some reason it felt like this song kind of came and went more so than the ones. Because when you think about it, you hear typically songs like What's My Age Again and like All the Small Things more often, but I really would like to hear some of these type songs, that some of these type tunes more often latest, because I feel like for the most part it just seems like a lot of rock stations will just pick like the biggest album that a band had and then their newest album that a band had, especially once they start having more than 6 or 7 albums or something like that. And this is just kind of an album that was good, but it just feels like Enema of the State kind of gets more play nowadays than just like the rest of the projects. And it's too bad, because this is a pretty standard song. It's definitely a dope song, but it's just kind of a carbon kind of token punk rock song, but I do like it. And the second single is First Date, and this one is definitely like a thumper. It doesn't quite have as punky of type sounds, not quite as guitar heavy, and just has like the manic guitar licks on here. It's just kind of more of like a bass guitar and kind of thump type bubbler type feel of it. But this is another one that has an excellent hook. I feel like The Rock Show and First Date both have some excellent hooks. I would have to say that these are great 1-2 punches, and they do a good Blink-182 does do a pretty excellent job of getting like some pretty factory made, ready to go punk rock hits in terms of the hooks and that type of stuff. It's just the fact that for some reason I just think the commercial bite was just not quite as venomous this time around, and that's just about the only thing about it. But First Date has a pretty manic hook. I'd say this song is probably about on par with like What's My Age Again. This is about the only song I feel like that's on par with Enema of the State in terms of the singles. But I would have to say I think First Date is up there with What's My Age Again, and probably definitely better than Adam's song. Maybe not quite as large as All the Small Things, but definitely on par with What's My Age Again. That's pretty good. And the rock show's up there too, but it's just kind of in the trajectory of it. But then the third single was Stay Together for the Kids, and this is a very similar format to Adam's song off of Enema of the State. Same kind of down tempo and kind of sluggish and muddled kind of energy, just like Adam's song. And I just would have to say that the same template that they copied as last time, I would have liked like a fourth single, at least on this project, just to kind of help bolster it and get the energy back and get the party started once again and get a little bit more rave energy. But they didn't do that. I mean, so there are some sluggish songs on here. I mean, I would suppose that Blink-182 can be emo, despite the fact that they're mostly punk and pop punk. But I kind of felt like I wasn't vibing too much with the overall energy of the song. I mean, I do like the fact that they're trying to showcase some different valves, but if you're not really if you're not really in the same mood about the context of what's going on, it just doesn't have the same valve. Like at least the last one was just more about depression, but this one's just kind of more in like a more specific topic kind of depression. So it's kind of a different kind of valve as far as the topic of depression as far as it goes this time around. But yeah, so these are just like, once again I have to say that the singles are just kind of like of a different energy than they were last time on Enema of the State. But I feel like they are more refined, but they just don't have like the most distinction this time around. The commercial venom is just not quite as feral this time. And maybe it's just because of rock stations that typically just tend to play like their best album and their most recent album that kind of contributes towards it. But I just feel like, you can blame commercial rock partially for why some of these songs need more airplay, but I just feel like a lot of these kind of get hodgepodge in between. If they don't hit like a certain counter on like the rock charts, it just gets swashed throughout like forgotten memories as far as trying to remember, like, hey, do you remember the rock show? Do you remember First Date? Do you remember Stay Together for the Kids? It just feels like, 22 years later, it kind of feels like they're kind of forgotten tunes, but they shouldn't be. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend, there's 13 songs on here, and I'm going to tell you guys what I'm going to do. So there's actually 6 extra songs because there's 3 versions of this album. There's the red album, the Takeoff album, there's the yellow album, the Pants album, and there's the green album, the Jacket album. And with each of these versions, these color versions of the album, there's 2 songs that are exclusive towards it. I don't feel like reviewing those songs in this particular review, but eventually I'm going to review this album again and just review all of the 6 songs that were supposed to be on this project as a whole. And I'll just review all of those and I'll pick out which version of the album I recommend the most, and the second place and the third place and such and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to do it now. But so yeah, for now I'm going to talk to you guys about the 9 songs out of 13 I recommend. So those 9 songs would be The Rock Show, First Date, Give Me One Good Reason, Anthem Part 2, Reckless Abandon, Happy Holidays You Bastard, Please Take Me Home, Shut Up, and Every Time I Look for You. So I really like the clever energy of Happy Holidays You Bastard. This is a really nice one. This is a nice holiday quickie. It just kind of has the Christmas spirit in like a punk way. Really just kind of conveys, despite the fact that this album came out in June, this is just a nice one to kind of get for, when it's like November, December, the Christmas auras in the air and all that manic kind of holiday cheer and shopping energy is kind of around. This is just a nice one for that kind of manic feel. It's a nice touch to kind of get that. I feel like Please Take Me Home is kind of a bickering song. I like the energy of this one, but basically this is kind of in the relationship in and outs. I feel like this is kind of, some of these are kind of party tunes, but some of these are more relationship oriented where they're not kind of having your homies in mind and stuff. And I feel like songs like Shut Up, Please Take Me Home, and yeah, Happy Holidays, You Bastard. So those are some ones. Happy Holidays, You Bastard, Please Take Me Home, and Shut Up are kind of more with your girl and kind of relationship type moments, where I feel like Please Take Me Home is kind of a bickering song. This is kind of has a nice, good guitar lick in there. Please Take Me Home has some like nice kind of distorted guitar in there. Just kind of, I mean, it doesn't have like the best riff, but it does kind of have like a kind of manic kind of. This kind of feels like a bickering kind of song, and like the ways of the production and such is just not quite a ravage kind of headbang and get punk kind of energy, but it just is kind of like, hey, you just kind of feel jittery and a little bit ornery kind of a song. I'd have to say with Please Take Me Home. Shut Up is like a breakup song. This actually has some pep towards it. This is definitely one that, despite the fact that it seems like the song has to deal with breaking up, I kind of feel like this is kind of like a decent pep of a song with some summer energy. That this is kind of almost chipper in the way that it kind of went. And there's a couple stomping ground songs, which I kind of like the concept of, just wherever you like to hang out, just places where you'd be with your buddies and just kind of kicking it and that type of stuff. I feel like songs like Give Me One Good Reason and the Anthem Part 2 are both some decent stomping grounds type songs. Give Me One Good Reason kind of has a similar beat to like What's My Age Again, just not quite as manic. It's more of a mid-tempo type tune compared to What's My Age Again from Enema, The State. And then the Anthem Part 2 is just kind of like a kind of more bass heavy one, similar to Shut Up. And yeah, similar to Shut Up, I would have to say. So, talk about a few more of these. Like, I feel like Reckless Abandon is a pretty nice pub song. This is like a nice night venue party type joint. Has kind of Reckless Abandon's a nice pub song, has a lot of night venue and kind of party like energy. This is probably one of the crazier songs on here. It's definitely like the most manic and kind of ready to go type energy. This one's not quite as relationship bound, even, I mean, if you're more listening to the lyrics it might be, but this is definitely kind of a party joint, and it's the same thing I feel about Every Time I Look for You. This one's kind of a more flirty song, but I do feel like this is kind of a getting ready to party type bubbler. That's kind of another bass guitar kind of heavy one, kind of like Shut Up and Give Me One Good Reason and some of those. So it just kind of happens to be a thing. So overall, that's just a lot of good stuff on here. But yeah, this record is kind of light on the party joints. Like this one's a little bit more relationship bound this time, and just kind of has like a different kind of distorted energy. There's just not songs on this project with the sheer velocity of like all the small things and What's My Age Again. Like I feel like those songs at least had like the relationships in mind also, but it was just kind of juggled and kind of in a dichotomy in addition to kind of being about stepping out and having a good time. This one just feels a lot more kind of like, hey, you're preoccupied with women this time around, and they're kind of more central than they were last time. And I feel like the party joints are just kind of downplayed, and they don't have quite the ferocious energy that they did on Enema of the State. And I kind of feel like as a result, that the energy is just kind of more centered, and it just feels like they're kind of preoccupied this time around. I think that's just kind of the concept. But I do like this album for what it is. I mean, there is some great moments for kind of date nights and kind of going out and about. There's some great energy for some stepping out and date nights and summer energy and that type of stuff, and just overall kind of good times just across the board of just having good times with women, and just overall joint parties and double dates and stuff like that that you would have and that sort of thing. But I just kind of look after it overall. The concept about it is it just doesn't have any reckless kind of songs, not really any drinking party type songs, or just kind of beer pong and that type stuff type tunes for something of that. I mean, I feel like maybe Reckless Abandon is about the closest thing to that, but for the most part, it's pretty centered. And this is kind of the concept. It just feels like they're a lot more like on a leash this time around than they were last time. So this is kind of the concept. And like I said, the singles on top of that are good, but they just don't have the overall venom compared to like what they did on Enema of the State. And that's just kind of the concept, where it just is kind of like they're just more hardcore rap. It's kind of like when a rapper will make not songs for like the Billboard 100 in terms of like the blue collar stuff, and they'll be more for like the hardcore rap charts, and they won't chart as high in that type of stuff. That's kind of what Blink-182 did with the rock That's kind of what Blink-182 did this time. They just kind of made it more exclusive to like the rock charts and kind of more hardcore rock. So that's just kind of the thing. There's just not anything as commercial as like All the Small Things or What's My Age Again. But so I'm gonna give this album me liking 9 out of 13. I'm talking like I'm about to give this album like a 3 out of 10. But I actually did like quite a bit of this. I mean, it's got quite the jolt of energy to kind of up the mood of my review a little bit, just to kind of say it's some pretty busy and kind of fun overall, and just great for some date nights and that type stuff. Just overall kind of jivey, stepping out, having like an active kind of social life type thing. So I'm gonna give this album me like a 9 out of 13. I'm gonna give this album an 8.75 out of 10, because one of which is just the quick skit slash mini song Happy Holidays, You Bastard. So an 8.75 I feel like is pretty damn good. I mean, I would give it a 9, but the 4 songs I didn't enjoy. I didn't really like the kind of 2 sluggish songs like Story of a Lonely Guy and Stay Together for the Kids. And I really didn't like the kind of arrangements of Roller Coaster, and then Online Songs was kind of a messy and just didn't work. Online Songs was just kind of messy and didn't work overall for me. But I feel like those 4 songs just kind of contributed to the lack of it. But I feel like, yeah, it gets an 8.75. It gets an 8.75 out of 10. Me only liking 2/3 of the singles probably contributes to that also. But the social score, I'm going to go ahead and give like a 9 out of 10, just because there's a lot of good songs on here for stepping out, especially stepping out with the date and that type stuff. But I just kind of feel like overall, it's not quite as much of a party album. I mean, it can be, but it just, like I said, this is more of an on a leash kind of. This is not so much of like a party album. This is kind of more of like an on a leash type project, and as a result, it just doesn't have the sheer craziness of the like college frat type craziness that the last album supposedly had, or at least was more believable to have had last time. So that just kind of happens to be a thing. But I look after it, 9 Social is still pretty damn good. I'm talking like I gave it a 6 or something, but it is good. And then in terms of the future, like Blink-182, they were supposedly working on something. They put out an album in 2019, so it's been a little while, but hopefully they'll come back soon and we'll get some more good stuff from these guys.